I'm abusing my position here by starting with a photograph. Does anyone know where this is? I will give you a clue. The sky is blue and perfect, so it is the west coast of Norway. This is a place called Hulsa, where my mother is from. She was born just down there. And I took this photo from my favorite place on the planet, which is the top of a mountain that we look out on from the house. And if anyone here is from Hulsa in Heim Kommune, come and find me. I'd love to speak to you. It's the best place anywhere, except Kristiansand, of course. So I was sorry to miss Bettina's talk this morning. I'm here teaching all week, teaching the PhD students about public health. We should have just sent them here. They'd have had a much nicer time. But I'm here to talk about complex systems and public health. And I got into the topic of complex systems and public health through work I've been doing for 15 or 20 years on obesity. And obesity, I think, presents one of the best examples, one of the best case studies to illustrate some of the themes that are really important in relation to complexity. So, at one level, it's really obvious and easy, isn't it, to understand what is driving obesity. It's too much of this, and not enough of whatever she's getting. But if you read the newspaper, if you watch the television, if you make the mistake of having a conversation with a random stranger in a bar about what is driving obesity, you would be told that, oh, it's about stupid people, it's about lazy people, it's about greedy people. All we need to do to tackle obesity is for people to get a grip and make better decisions. That is the language that is everywhere. If that was true, we would all collectively have had to have become lazier, weaker-willed, and greedier over the last 30, 40, or 50 years. I am very, very happy to accept that I am lazy, I am weak-willed, and I am greedy, but I do not accept that my generation is lazier, weaker-willed, and greedier than my parents' generation, or that my kids' generation is lazier, weaker-willed, and greedier than my generation. What has changed to drive the obesity epidemic is not us as people. It is the world around us. Now, this may not be downtown Kristiansand. This is Breezewood, Pennsylvania. But actually, everywhere is like this. When I was a kid, if I wanted to change the channel on the television, I had to get up off the sofa, walk across the room, turn a knob, sit down, realize the volume was too low, turn the volume up, sit down. That might have burnt 1 or 2 calories, but we have taken that out of my life. We've given me a clicker so I don't have to walk over here to a laptop. We have changed the world around us. When I was a student, we went to a cafe once a week. It was a bit strange because it was after we'd done anatomical dissection, so we had bits of human flesh under our fingernails when we ate our buns. But, you know, that's what we did. My students now work in the cafe. The world has changed. So, sure, this isn't downtown Kristiansand, but actually this is everywhere. And we hear about the language of choice. Make a healthy choice if that's where you live. You have a lot of choices. You can have a pizza, you can have a burger, you can have chicken wings, you can drive somewhere, or you can drive somewhere. The language of choice needs to acknowledge the range of options from which those choices are made. And those options are framed, not entirely, but very often, by commercial interests that have money to make out of your choices. And we need to be really clear about the role of these people. And one of the things that has got me into thinking about systems is to move away from saying, okay, what do we do now, to what do we do to change these big picture factors that shape our behaviors? So I've increasingly, over the last 15 years, been working on what do we do about complex adaptive systems. And I did science at school. I trained and worked as a doctor. I did a master's in public health where we did epidemiology and statistics. This is what I learnt to do, to be one of the people in this room doing really robust work to try and answer the question, does A lead to B? And collectively, as scientists, we're really good at that. But what we don't do enough of is to look at open the door and look at what's really going on in the real world outside. Because, sure, we want to know what happens when, does A cause B? But there are actually bigger things to worry about. And if we ignore them, if we fail to think about the systems within which we function, the systems that shape public health, we will miss the point. So I'm here teaching all week. I'm teaching a course on public health to PhD students, and we've spent 2 days talking about systems. I've got about 1.5 minutes to try and convey those ideas. But here is a very simple, believe me, it's a simple one, system map about factors that shape physical activity. And in the middle, we've got total activity, we've got cycling, walking, sport, and play. And over here, we've got individual level factors. What's your level of motivation? What's your level of knowledge? Those kinds of things. And over here, we've got environmental factors. Are there safe places to walk or cycle? Is the air polluted? Do the cars go too fast? And this was a tool to help us and help other people to think about the factors that shape physical activity. Because when physical activity policy gets done at national level, Norway, I'm sure, is an exception here, but all too often, it gets sent to the Minister of Sport, who is told to organise more football matches, or the Minister of Health, who's told to get more people into gyms. And this was part of some work I did with colleagues in the World Health Organization that fed into the WHO, World Health Organization Global Action Plan on Physical Activity, where we deliberately took a systems approach to thinking not just about sport, not just about play, but all of the things that shape physical activity. Sure, some of those things are about individual choices, but most of those things are about the things that shape the environments that then shape our choices. One of the other concepts we need to get at here is the concept of complexity. So we have these systems, and they are complex. And again, this is maybe a 3-week seminar series to sort out what we really mean by complexity. But there is one concept that I think is really straightforward and essential, and that is the concept of the difference between something that is complicated and something that is complex. So this is a Saturn V rocket, and they're pretty complicated. There's a lot of things going on there, and there's a little person at the bottom to show the size of it for scale. But if you know what you're doing, and you've got all the machinery and the parts, you can build one of these things, and you can get 3 very brave volunteers to sit in that tiny little cone at the top. Any volunteers? But if we had all the gear, we could build one of these. We could go out to Ruttersplatz and build one. And what day is it? It's Thursday. Okay, let's give ourselves just over a week. So next Friday, we're going to launch it. And I don't know how long a moonshot takes, but you know full well that the people who build these know exactly how long a moonshot takes. So we will get the volunteers, and next Friday we will send you off to the moon, and whatever it is, 5 days later, we will know to within a few hundred meters and 1 or 2 minutes where to collect you from in the harbour. That is significantly more precision than collecting a teenager from a party. But we can do it. Incredibly complicated, but not complex, because this is a map of complexity. So this is a map of obesity that came out from the 2007 UK government foresight project on obesity. And what it shows is that everything's connected to everything else. And in the middle, we've got energy balance. When you are a hunter-gatherer, what we have evolved to do is to consume food as a survival mechanism. You see a woolly mammoth, you kill it and eat it. And when there are no woolly mammoths, you sit in your cave with your feet up, watching TV to conserve energy. That's a survival mechanism. But we are not adapted for the environment in which we now live, where there are woolly mammoth steaks wherever you look, and they're cheap, and they're beautifully packaged, and they last for ages in your refrigerator. There are woolly mammoth steaks everywhere. And over here we've got physical activity, over here we've got diet, down here we've got biology, and at the top we've got society and culture. They're all connected. We've got physical activity here. The very best donuts, plural, I ever ate were at a Department of Health Regional Obesity Leads meeting. I had arrived in London with my little folding bicycle. I had cycled right across London really fast because I was late, because I'm always late. I burnt 250 calories cycling to that meeting. I took the cling film, the wrap off the donuts. I had a donut. It was so good, I had a second one. I had expended there and back maybe 500 calories on my bicycle, and I had consumed 700 calories of donut. You go to the gym, you work out for an hour, you buy a chocolate bar from the vending machine as you leave, because you've been really good. These things are all related. The word that often gets forgotten in all of this is adaptive, or adaptation. And in some ways, this is the most important, because adaptation is one of the reasons that it is so hard to generate evidence of effectiveness. Because if you intervene in a system, the system pushes back. The system will respond when you intervene. So I was involved in the evaluation of our UK sugar-sweetened drinks tax. And at one level, the way in which a sugar-sweetened drinks tax works is pretty obvious, isn't it? I would say there's only one bit of evidence we need here, and we have an economist in the room, and that's the price elasticity of demand of sugar-sweetened drinks around here. And I think I've got this right way around, I think it's -1. So if you put up the price by 10%, sales go down by 10%. If you put up the price by 20%, sales go down by 20%. Pretty straightforward, isn't it? Well, the trouble is that at every step along the way, the system pushes back. Before you bring it in, industry says, oh, this is terrible. There'll be thousands of job losses, thousands of them. You can't do that, government. You can't bring in a tax. If you do bring in a tax, it's got to be really small. Some of the adaptations are great, really positive. So between the tax being announced and coming into force, 2-year period, a third of drinks had the sugar taken out of them to below the taxation threshold. A huge amount of sugar was taken out of our food supply. That's a great adaptation. But we also saw price restructuring. So one of the big drinks companies, they put up the price of their sugary drinks because of the tax. They also put up the price of their diet drinks. So they made more money. That's fair enough, fair play to them. But the tax had no effect on that particular brand. You get over here, and you start to get bad actors, industry-funded actors, diverting attention. There's an organisation in the United Kingdom called the Institute of Economic Affairs. They describe themselves as a think tank. They're actually a junk tank. They take funding from they don't tell anyone who they take their funding from, but they get funding from the sugar industry, the tobacco industry, the fossil fuel industry. And they've got some very clever people working there. And those people were placing stories in the newspapers about those of us on the evaluation team. The very worst I got was Harry Rutter is a dyed-in-the-wool nanny state bigot, which for a while was my Twitter handle. But a colleague of mine on the evaluation team got some really quite nasty attacks to undermine his credibility as a scientist. So this thing happens right across the board. And even if sugar-sweetened drinks were the only thing influencing obesity, I would not expect this intervention to tackle and reduce that outcome, because obesity is a 500-piece jigsaw puzzle, a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. This is only a couple of those pieces. Doesn't mean they're not important. But we shouldn't expect this intervention on its own to stop that massive problem. So when we did our evaluation, we didn't use a simple linear logic model. We used a system map. And we looked at things like Okay, what was the effect on the profits of the sugar-sweetened drinks industry? What happened to their share price? Well, their share price dipped briefly, came straight back up. So we were able to find some of these things out. And we did, in fact, to my amazement, actually find some impacts on obesity. One of the other things about this whole complexity thing is, and I've kind of mentioned it in relation to adaptation, is it plays out in relation to evidence. And we all want evidence to support what we're going to do. But one of the problems with public health evidence is that it is not neutral. So I came up with this idea. It's actually just a Venn diagram, but I was at a conference in Portugal with an amazing bowl of olives in front of me. So instead of it being a Venn diagram, it's an olive. But I came up with this thing. It's the dangerous olive of evidence. So if you imagine an olive, and go on, we've got lunch coming soon, the flesh of the olive is all the things you could possibly do about a problem, let's say obesity. And you've all got good ideas around that. Then the olive is stuffed with a pepper, which is the subset of them for which we've got some evidence of effectiveness. And the pepper is stuffed with a small piece of garlic, which is the subset of them for which we've got evidence of cost effectiveness. Now, who in their right mind, when asked to do something about obesity, would not say, we're going to do the cost-effective things, or at least the things for which we have evidence of effectiveness? Well, the trouble is that the olive is dangerous because the things that sit there are particular kinds of things. So this is an old figure from a 2011 Lancet paper on obesity, but what it shows is a range from the individual level up to the big picture structural population level. So the most extreme thing we've got on the right-hand side is bariatric surgery. I mean, the GLP-1 agonists are now kind of taking over from that, but still, individual level treatment. Up here, we've got things like sugar taxes. The most extreme thing up here would probably be a really meaningful carbon tax, $1,000 a tonne, $2,000 a tonne, where it really ought to be, which would reshape our food systems, our transport systems, our physical activity systems. And what Boyd Swinburne, who put this together, put here was population effect and political difficulty. Politicians do not get thrown out of office for supporting health services. Politicians do get thrown out of office for bringing in new taxes. But the really big effects come from the stuff on this side. But our evidence base is skewed over here. It is much easier to evaluate, with a randomized controlled trial, does Wegovy reduce, or Ozempic reduce weight, than it is to evaluate the global impact of a $1,000 a tonne carbon tax. You can't do a randomized controlled trial of that. So we have an evidence base that is skewed towards the individual level. And individual level interventions, not always, but in general, have a tendency to widen health inequalities. If you do something that works at individual level, it's much more likely to work in people like us than poor, less educated people at the other end of society. So we've got to think about how much agency people have, how much autonomy and agency they have, and I saw the word autonomy cropping up a lot, to respond to the things that we put out there. And I wanted to end by kind of representing some of this in a system map that I put together where about just some of the things that play out in relation to obesity. And it's a very skewed picture, it was just to make a point. But if we look at the role of corporate actors in obesity, they're pushing out a load of messaging to try and frame the problem, try and shape how it gets conceptualized by the public and by policymakers. And I would argue that if we bring in systems approaches, they can help us to drive structural responses which push back against some of that and can help to create a more balanced system in which we can realistically get meaningful action over the medium to long term. And talking about timeframes, one of the things that we tend to do, not just in public health, actually in all public policy and those kinds of activities, is we answer the question, what should we do now? And the question we do not even ask is, what is our 20-year vision? Where do we want to be? We are not going to turn the tide on obesity, climate change, any of these big things over the course of 1, 2, 3 years. It's going to take decades. So what is our 20-year vision? You have a 4-year political cycle in Norway. What is our 4-year strategy? What can we do in the context of a right-of-centre government, or what can we do in the context of a left-of-centre government? Because you might be able to do different things. And then, and only then, do we say, what do we do now? But what we do now helps us get to where we want to be in 20 years. And one of the ways to characterize this is to say, let's play chess, not checkers. Sjakk, ikke dam. It's a rap meme, apparently. So I think we should be playing chess. We should be saying, what's our end game? Whatever your problem is that you're dealing with, what is the end game for obesity? I don't know the answer, but I've asked many policymakers. They don't know the answer either. What's the end game? And then you map out a set of moves. You know those moves won't happen because your opponent will do something to get in the way, but you adapt. You change your plan as time goes on. And I think we need to get much better at playing sjakk, ikke dam. So there are some conclusions, but the really big conclusion, because I was asked to give you one takeaway, was det ikke rakettvitenskap. Bare spille sjakk, ikke dam. Thank you.